"Clint, you might be the most fake guest I have ever had on my show," said Kimmel harshly, his voice slicing through the air like a blade, each word dripping with venom as the audience gasped in unison. The studio, alive with the buzz of a live broadcast, froze in stunned silence. Clint Eastwood, his weathered face etched with lines of a life hard-lived, leaned forward in his chair, his steely eyes locking onto Kimmel's smug grin. The tension was a coiled spring, ready to snap. "What did you just say to me, Jimmy?" Eastwood growled, his voice low, gravelly, like the rumble of a distant storm. Kimmel, unfazed, leaned back, his arms crossed, a mocking glint in his eye. "You heard me, Clint. All this tough guy, squinting cowboy act, it is tired. People want real, not some relic pretending he is still relevant." The crowd murmured, some shocked, others egging on the fight with nervous laughter. Eastwood's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the armrests, knuckles whitening. "You think you can sit there, behind your little desk, and judge me," he spat, each word deliberate, heavy with decades of defiance. "I have been making stories that last longer than your entire career, kid." Kimmel's smirk widened, sensing blood in the water. "Oh, please, Clint. Your stories. Same old macho nonsense, recycled. For 50 years. The audience wants fresh, not some dusty Western retread. You are here because we needed a name, not because anyone cares what you have to say." The jab landed hard, and Eastwood's face darkened, a flicker of rage breaking through his usual calm. He stood slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the set, and pointed a finger at Kimmel. "You invited me here, Jimmy. You begged for me to show up, and now you want to tear me down to make yourself look big? Pathetic." The audience erupted, some cheering Eastwood's fire, others booing Kimmel's cruelty. Kimmel, never one to back down, shot back. "You think you are untouchable? You are a guest, Clint. My guest. Sit down and play nice, or this gets worse." The threat hung heavy, a gauntlet thrown down in front of thousands watching live and millions more at home. The argument's root began to surface, a wound Kimmel had poked at unknowingly, or perhaps with cruel intent. Months earlier, Eastwood had pitched a film project to Kimmel's production company, a gritty drama about a retired rancher facing a changing world. Kimmel, in a private meeting, had laughed it off, calling it outdated, a relic of a bygone era, words that stung Eastwood's pride. Now, on live television, Kimmel was dragging that rejection into the open, twisting the knife in front of an audience. "You want to talk about my work, Jimmy?" Eastwood said, his voice rising, raw with anger. "You did not have the guts to back my film, so now you mock me to save face? You are a coward hiding behind jokes." Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his composure slipping for a moment, caught off guard by Eastwood's accusation. The crowd sensed the shift, their murmurs growing louder, feeding off the raw hostility. Kimmel recovered quickly, his voice sharp as he leaned forward. "I did not back your film because it was garbage, Clint. Nobody wants to watch an old man mumble about horses for 2 hours." The audience gasped again, the insult so personal it felt like a slap. Eastwood took a step closer, his presence commanding, dangerous. "You do not get to talk to me like that," he said, his voice now a low snarl, each word measured but burning with fury. "I have earned my place. You? You are just a loudmouth with a microphone, tearing down better men to feel something." The crowd roared, split between loyalty to Kimmel's wit and awe at Eastwood's unyielding defiance. Kimmel, sensing the tide, turning, stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You want to play the legend card? Fine, but this is my show, and I decide who looks small." He gestured to the audience, trying to rally them. "Who here thinks Clint still got it?" The response was mixed, some cheering, others silent, unsure. Eastwood's eyes never left Kimmel's, a silent promise that this was far from over. "You want to fight, Jimmy?" he said, his voice chillingly calm. "You just got one." The segment cut to commercial, the tension unresolved, leaving the audience hungry for what came next. The commercial break ended, and the cameras swung back to the set, capturing Jimmy Kimmel adjusting his tie, his face a mask of forced calm. Clint Eastwood stood near the edge of the stage, his back to the host, staring out at the audience like a lion sizing up a crowd of hyenas. The applause sign flickered, but the clapping was hesitant, the room thick with unease. Kimmel cleared, his throat, his voice sharp but unsteady. "Welcome back, folks. Let us try to keep this civil, shall we?" He shot a glance at Eastwood, who turned slowly, his boots heavy on the polished floor. "Civil?" Eastwood said, his tone laced with scorn. "You threw that out the window when you started this, Jimmy." The audience murmured, some leaning forward, others shifting uncomfortably, sensing the fight was about to reignite. Kimmel, determined to regain control, leaned forward, his elbows on his desk, fingers steepled. "Clint, nobody is questioning your legacy. But let us be honest, your last few films? They tanked. Maybe it is time to step aside, let new blood take over." The jab was calculated, meant to wound, and it did. Eastwood's eyes flashed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can lecture me about my work? I was telling stories when you were still begging for a gig on radio." The crowd erupted, some cheering Eastwood's defiance, others egging Kimmel on, craving more drama. Kimmel's smile was tight, his patience fraying. "Oh, come on, Clint. You are a living fossil. That rancher film you pitched? It was a snooze. I did you a favor by passing on it." Eastwood took a step closer, his presence towering despite his age. "A favor?" he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a whip. "You did not pass on it, Jimmy. You humiliated me. Told your team it was a joke, laughed in my face. You think I do not know?" The revelation hit the audience like a shockwave, gasps rippling through the crowd. Kimmel's face twitched, a flicker of guilt quickly buried under bravado. "So what?" he snapped. "I run a business, Clint. I do not greenlight flops to stroke your ego." The crowd booed, some at Kimmel's cruelty, others at the chaos unfolding. Eastwood's hands clenched, his voice steady but burning. "You do not get it, do you? That film was not just a project. It was about a man fighting to hold on to what matters, something you would not understand." Kimmel stood again, his chair scraping loudly, his face red with anger. "Do not preach to me about meaning, old man. You want to talk about what matters? How about showing up prepared instead of coasting? On your name!" The audience gasped, the insult raw, personal. Eastwood's gaze hardened, his voice low and lethal. "You invited me here to prop up your ratings, then you spit in my face. You are not a host, Jimmy. You are a vulture." The crowd roared, split, between loyalty to Kimmel's sharp tongue and awe at Eastwood's unyielding fire. Kimmel, sensing he was losing ground, leaned into the attack. "You want to talk vultures? Look in the mirror, Clint. You are clinging to a career that is done. Step off my stage if you cannot handle the truth." Eastwood's lips curled into a grim smile, the kind that promised trouble. "I am not done, Jimmy. Not by a long shot. But you? You are digging your own grave right now." The audience erupted again, the energy electric, feeding off the raw hostility. Kimmel, flustered but defiant, gestured to the band. "Play us to break," he barked, trying to cut the segment short. Eastwood shook his head, his voice carrying over the music. "This is not over, Jimmy. Not by a damn sight." As the cameras panned away, the audience was left buzzing, hooked on the escalating war, desperate to see how far it would go. The show snapped back from commercial, the audience still crackling with energy, their whispers a low hum as the cameras found Jimmy Kimmel behind his desk, his smirk now a thin, brittle line. Clint Eastwood stood at the stage's edge, his back rigid, hands loose but ready, like a gunslinger waiting for the draw. The air was thick, the crowd sensing blood. Kimmel tapped his pen on the desk, a sharp, rhythmic tick that cut through the tension. "All right, Clint, let us dial this back," he said, his voice oily, insincere. "You are upset about your little movie." "Fine, but throwing a tantrum on my show? That is low, even for you." The crowd stirred, some hissing at Kimmel's condescension, others waiting for Eastwood's response. Clint turned, his eyes narrowing, voice steady as stone. "You do not get to play the peacemaker now, Jimmy. You started this fire. Own it." Kimmel's eyes flashed, his patience gone. "Own it? Oh, I will. You want to know why I killed your film? Because it was not just bad, Clint. It was embarrassing. I showed it to a friend, a real producer, and he laughed harder than I did." The audience gasped, the betrayal stinging even them. Eastwood's face tightened, a flicker of something deeper than anger, hurt, raw and real, crossing his features, before the steel returned. "You showed it to someone else?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. "You took my work, something I poured my soul into, and passed it around like a cheap joke?" The crowd fell silent, the weight of the violation sinking in. Kimmel shrugged, leaning back, his arrogance on full display. "That is how it works, Clint. You pitch, we judge. Your script did not make the cut. Deal with it." Eastwood stepped forward, his boots echoing in the quiet, each step deliberate. "The friend you showed it to, Jimmy, was that Tom Harlan?" The name hit like a thunderclap, and Kimmel's face froze, his smugness cracking. Tom Harlan, a veteran producer and Eastwood's old friend, had been a bridge between them, someone Clint trusted. The audience sensed the shift, their murmurs rising. "You think I do not hear things?" Eastwood continued, his voice ablade. "Tom told me you trashed my work to him, said it was a favor to save me from failure. But you did not stop there, did you? You tried to poach him for your own projects, cut me out entirely." Kimmel's jaw worked, his eyes darting, caught in the open. "That is business, Clint," he snapped, but his voice wavered. "You are too old to keep up." Tom saw that. The crowd roared, some booing Kimmel's betrayal, others shouting support for Eastwood's defiance. Clint's voice rose, cutting through the noise. "Business? You call backstabbing a man who trusted you business? I built my career on loyalty, something you would not know if it bit you." Kimmel stood, his face flushed, fists clenched on the desk. "Do not lecture me about loyalty, you old fool. You are here because I let you be here. You want to talk betrayal? How about you, dragging Tom's name into this to save your pride?" The accusation was desperate, and the audience sensed it, their cheers leaning toward Eastwood. Clint shook his head, his voice cold. Final. "You crossed a line, Jimmy. You do not just mock me. You mock everyone who ever believed in telling a story that matters." Kimmel, cornered, lashed out. "Stories that matter? Spare me. Your time is up, Clint. Go back to your ranch and leave the real work to us." The crowd gasped, the cruelty raw, but Eastwood stood taller, his presence unshakable. "My time is not up," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "But yours? You are burning out right here, in front of everyone." The audience erupted, the energy wild, as Kimmel signaled for another break, his face a mask of fury. Eastwood turned, his eyes locked on the crowd, a silent vow that he was not done fighting. The cameras rolled back on, catching Jimmy Kimmel pacing behind his desk, his face a storm of frustration, while Clint Eastwood stood rooted near the stage's center, his gaze steady, unyielding, like a mountain weathering a gale. The audience was electric, their cheers and jeers a chaotic pulse, sensing the showdown nearing its peak. Kimmel stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto Eastwood with a venomous glare. "You think you can come here, throw around accusations and win the crowd?" he said, his voice sharp, cutting. "This is my turf, Clint. You do not get to rewrite the story." Eastwood's lips twitched, a flicker of disdain. I am not here to win them, Jimmy. I am here to call you out. The crowd roared, their loyalty split but leaning toward Eastwood's raw defiance. Kimmel, his composure fraying, slammed a hand on his desk, the sound sharp enough to hush the room. Call me out? For what? Doing my job? Your film was a loser. Clint, I saved you from tanking your legacy. And Tom Harlan? He agreed with me. He said you are out of touch. The audience gasped, the betrayal cutting deeper, a wound reopened. Eastwood's eyes narrowed, his voice low, dangerous. Tom called. Me after your little stunt, Jimmy. He told me how you twisted his words, tried to turn him against me. You did not just kill my film. You tried to kill my name. The revelation hit hard, the crowd murmuring, some shouting in outrage at Kimmel's tactics. Kimmel's face twitched, his confidence slipping. That is nonsense, he snapped. You are paranoid, clinging to a past nobody cares about. Eastwood stepped closer, his presence commanding, his voice steady, but laced with fury. Paranoid? You spread lies to your industry buddies, said I was washed up, too old to direct. You thought you could bury me quietly. The crowd erupted, their boos aimed at Kimmel, who flinched but doubled down. I said what everyone is thinking. Clint, you are a has-been, dragging your tired westerns into a world that moved on. Step aside before you embarrass yourself further. The audience hissed, the cruelty too raw, but Eastwood stood taller, his voice cutting through the noise. Embarrass myself? I have been knocked down harder than you can imagine, kid. I get back up, always. You? You hide behind your desk, stabbing backs to stay relevant. Kimmel's eyes blazed, his voice rising to a shout. Relevant? I do not need to. Ride your coattails, Clint. I invited you here out of pity, and you repay me by making a scene? The crowd jeered, sensing Kimmel's desperation. Eastwood shook his head, his tone cold. Final. Pity. You needed my name to pull ratings, and now you are scared because I am not bowing to you. The audience cheered, their support for Eastwood swelling. Kimmel, cornered, leaned forward, his voice dripping with spite. You want to talk scared? I have got a scoop, Clint. I was going to save it, but since you want to play dirty, I heard you begged studios for months to fund that film. Begged. And they all said no. The crowd fell silent, the humiliation stinging, but Eastwood's face remained stone, his voice steady. I do not beg, Jimmy. I fight. And I am fighting you right now. The audience exploded, their cheers shaking the room, fully behind Eastwood's unyielding spirit. Kimmel, his face red, gestured wildly to the crew. Cut to break, he shouted, his voice cracking. Eastwood turned to the crowd, raising a hand, his presence silencing the chaos. You want to bury me, Jimmy? He said, his voice ringing clear. You will have to try harder than that. The cameras swiveled away, the audience chanting Eastwood's name, the tension a live wire ready to spark again. The show roared back to life, the audience's chants of Clint, Clint, still echoing as the cameras swept across the set. Jimmy Kimmel sat rigid behind his desk, his face a mask of barely contained rage, his fingers gripping a pen so tightly, it seemed it might snap. Clint Eastwood stood tall, his weathered frame a pillar of defiance, his eyes locked on Kimmel with a fire that silenced the room. The crowd hushed, sensing the final showdown. Kimmel forced a laugh, his voice sharp, venomous. All right, Clint, you have got their cheers. Happy now? But let us cut the act. You are a fading star, and I am done indulging your tantrum. Eastwood's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm, lethal. Indulging me? You dragged me here to tear me down, Jimmy. You made this personal. Now you face the consequences. Kimmel leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malice. Consequences? What, you going? To squint me to death? The audience gasped, the jab cruel, but Eastwood didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his boots heavy on the stage, his voice rising with controlled fury. "You think you can mock me, mock my work, and walk away clean? You spread lies about me, Jimmy. You told half of Hollywood I was done, that my film was a joke. But you forgot one thing. I do not quit." The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the room fully in Eastwood's corner. Kimmel's face flushed, his voice cracking as he shot back. "Quit? You should have quit 10 years ago. I did the industry a favor, saving them from your tired ideas." The audience booed, their disdain for Kimmel's cruelty palpable. Eastwood raised, a hand silencing the crowd, his presence commanding every eye. "You want to talk about favors?" he said, his voice steady, cutting. "Let me tell you about the calls I got after you trashed my name. Directors, actors, people I have worked with for decades, they called me. Not to bury me, but to back me. My film? It is greenlit now, no thanks to you." The audience roared, the revelation a gut punch to Kimmel's smugness. His eyes widened, his composure crumbling. "That is a lie," he stammered, but the crowd's cheers drowned him out. Eastwood pressed on, his voice ringing with conviction. "You tried to break me, Jimmy. You betrayed my trust, used Tom Harlan to spread your poison. But you misjudged me. I am not just a name. I am a fighter, and I am still standing." Kimmel, desperate, stood up, his voice a shout. "You think you are some hero? You are a relic, Clint. This show, this stage, it is mine, and I say you are done." The audience jeered, their loyalty gone, but Eastwood's smile was cold, triumphant. "Your stage? Maybe. But this fight? It is over, and you lost." He turned to the crowd, his voice strong, unwavering. "I make stories for people who believe in something real, something true. Not for cowards who tear others down to feel big." The crowd exploded, their applause deafening as Kimmel sank back into his chair, his face ashen, defeated. Eastwood turned, his stride purposeful, and walked off the stage, the audience chanting his name louder with every step. Kimmel tried to speak, to salvage the moment, but his words were lost in the roar. "Clint! Clint!" The cameras followed Eastwood until he disappeared into the wings, his head high, his legacy intact. The show cut to its final break, but the audience kept chanting, their energy a testament to Eastwood's victory. Backstage, he paused, his eyes gleaming with quiet pride. He had faced Kimmel's venom and walked away taller, his spirit unbroken, his story far from over.